Hello, I'm Eduardo Gonçalves from the Climate Group, and welcome to Climate TV. Today we're going to be talking about the critical role of the business community in tackling climate change and the business opportunities in the low-carbon economy. With me today to discuss this is Ben Ferrari, the International Partnerships Director at the Climate Group. There's some very interesting things happening in the business community at the moment around innovation and investment in the low-carbon sector. Do you think that we're seeing a transition happening in the global business community towards a low-carbon economy?
We certainly are, and that's because a lot of major corporates are now realising genuine bottom-line benefits from these investments. And that's critical because for a long time the more far-sighted managers and directors of these companies have believed that there is a prize to be captured here. Now they can demonstrate that fact to their shareholders, to their employees, to the consuming public. And this builds a momentum that I think is unstoppable. That's not to say that all our problems are solved. Policymakers still have a great deal to do to accelerate the changes that we need. I'm confident, however, that the corporate sector is beginning to play its part in delivering the changes we want.
Some companies, in fact quite a lot of them now, are saying that they want to see a strong and ambitious and unambiguous outcome at the Paris climate talks later this year. Why do you think that is?
The Climate Group believes in the positive role of major companies in achieving a transition to the low carbon economy that will avoid the worst impacts of climate change. But we know that these companies, however committed, cannot deliver that change without a stable and predictable policy and financial framework. Now, a strong agreement in Paris in December will not guarantee all of those things, but it's a very strong signal to the corporate world that governments are going to be consistent, committed, and determined to make the difference. That will give them the confidence to invest. That will give them the confidence to act more quickly. That's why a strong, unambiguous deal is essential in Paris.
Of course, whatever is agreed at the Paris talks won't come into force until 2020. And so there's a lot of talk about the very important role of non-state actors, businesses and others, in helping to achieve those major emissions reductions that are going to be needed to keep us within safer thresholds. So what are you, as the International Partnerships Director at the Climate Group, looking to do to convene and catalyse the actions and the actors in that very important period?
We're going to be focusing on a number of key campaigns, and the characteristics that these campaigns will share are they will address big challenges, they will provide support as well as, shall we say, encouragement to corporates, and they will make clear that policymakers, national and subnational governments have a critical role to play in enabling the change that we want. A very good example is RE100. That campaign is challenging major corporates to commit to 100% renewable energy. Now we know that's tough, that's really hard. For a multinational company operating in multiple environments, that is difficult, we know that. So it's not just about setting the bar high, it's about making sure there is technical support, making sure the companies who join can learn from other companies in a peer-to-peer learning environment, and it's about involving our subnational partners in developing the incentives and the policies that will enable progressive corporates to deliver on these commitments. So you can see, we're not just going to be shouting at corporates, we're going to be setting targets, celebrating success, but making sure that all those elements of the enabling environment are also promoted by these campaigns.
The Climate Group is also starting to do some work about how we rethink the home, and I think there's a new initiative called Home 2025. What is it that you can tell us about that?
In the run-up to Paris, there's a huge focus on international agreements, the role of governments, the role of international organisations. And of course that's critical, and the Climate Group will do everything it can to support all of these actors in delivering the agreement that we need. There's a risk, though, that we forget how much can be achieved by individuals making decisions, changing the way they do things, changing the way they use and think about their homes. So we think it's a really important thing to say, in the run-up to Paris, let's also think about the domestic level of this challenge. We talk about energy efficiency. We talk about new gadgets and opportunities. Too often, however, we're talking about choices and options that are actually only available to quite a small part of the population. And that's both in the developed world and the developing world. What we've seen as we've begun to think about the home and the emission-saving potential of the home is that we need to broaden out these opportunities. So we've looked at some of the project work we've already done, like Bidgely, looking at off-grid and rural energy. We've looked at what some of our corporate partners are doing in terms of developing low-carbon technology for the home. And we're thinking, so why isn't this being taken up more rapidly? What are the barriers? We've found that in India, for example, there's a significant group of the population who have a home, they have good income, but actually they have very few choices that they can make to create a lower carbon living space for themselves. Even in the UK, where we are used to thinking of ourselves as, fairly enlightened and with many choices, the reality is that large parts of the population actually have very limited choices in terms of energy supply, green tariffs, lower carbon technologies. So we're saying there's a huge potential to save emissions through the way we build and use our homes, but the opportunities are not evenly distributed, even within the developed world. So let's highlight the opportunity, let's highlight that unevenness, and let's really engage our corporate partners in staying true to what they tell us. They tell us they want to develop low carbon choices for the many. Well, let's see what that really means, and let's help them really explore how we can make sure that a low carbon home is a choice available to as many people as possible.
Now, commercial and residential buildings account for, less than 10% of global greenhouse gas emissions. So why is it important to cast a light on the domestic technologies that can help drive down our carbon footprint?
Well, let's look at Europe, just as an example here. There have been various calculations, but I think it's generally agreed that the vast majority of buildings that will exist in Europe in 2050 have already been built. So there is a massive opportunity to look at renovation of these buildings. That can create healthier living spaces, that can create lower emissions through better use of energy, and it can also create huge employment opportunities in the retrofit and the renovation process. So what we're saying is there's a triple win there if you look at the domestic homes in Europe. It's not just about emissions, although that's critically important. It's also about health. It's also about employment. That's got to be worth looking at.
So the Climate Group has been working with businesses right from the very outset. Why is it, and why is that being such an important part of its story, and how important is it going to be in the future?
It's central to what sets the Climate Group apart from many other players in this space. Let's think about 10 years ago, when the Climate Group was formed. The low carbon economy was thought of as a kind of a negative concept. It was a place you didn't want to go. The Climate Group's work with major corporates really helped people to understand that actually the low carbon economy is a positive thing. It's about growth, it's about high quality jobs. And communicating that message very clearly, particularly to politicians, I think was highly influential in changing the terms of that debate. Now we have a situation where we are seeing progressive companies making their ambitions very clear. They're doing things that we need them to do. But equally, there are parts of the industrial base, energy intensive, fossil fuel dependent, whose voice is sometimes more ambiguous. We need to keep working with those corporates to make sure that the positive aspect of the changes they're making are properly understood, properly communicated. We are very close to a position where you can no longer say that industry doesn't want this change. The work of CDP, for example, on carbon pricing demonstrated that many major corporates are already using a carbon price to assess their own internal investment programs. So the notion that corporates can't bear a carbon price is nonsense. We need to communicate this. We need to make it clear that we have a progressive set of companies making big changes, and we need to keep up that pressure, keep up that communication, keep engaging with the people who will actually deliver the economy that we need.
That was Ben Ferrari, the International Partnerships Director at the Climate Group, talking about the role of business in tackling climate change and the opportunities for building a strong, low-carbon economy. That's all from us today. Hope you'll join us again soon. From everyone at the Climate Group, goodbye.